is from the Tucson area. Could even be from that neighborhood, but is from somewhere in the Tucson area. And since the beginning, that has been a theory that I have heard over and over again.
It was bolted shut, protected by a heavy iron Diablo security gate built to prevent this exact nightmare. Yet, there is zero evidence of tampering, no prying, no splintered wood, no signs of a struggle. 52 days ago, an intruder slipped inside under the cover of darkness. They abducted an 84-year-old woman with a failing heart and a pacemaker, vanishing while the city was asleep. This individual navigated the locked home with an eerie precision, avoiding the typical violent mess left behind by a random burglar. Not a single window was smashed, and no crowbars were used. The family is now offering $1 million for Nancy's safe return. The Bureau chipped in another $100,000. Combined with private contributions, the total bounty has climbed past $1.2 million. Now, 52 days later, that cash sits untouched. There have been no arrests, no persons of interest named, and no clear motive established. One nagging question has haunted this case from the very first hour of the disappearance. It is a mystery the Pima County Sheriff's Office has pointedly avoided addressing in any official capacity. Forensic experts, former federal agents, and even neighbors with identical security setups are all obsessing over the same riddle. How did he breach the house? That is not just a detail. It is the linchpin of the entire investigation. Entering a fortified home without making a sound or leaving a trace reveals a terrifying truth about the culprit's identity. Random attackers are loud and messy. They have to guess. But someone with inside information operates differently. Someone familiar with the floor plan or the specific keys needed for each lock doesn't need luck. They have a map in their head. A new witness has emerged with information that might completely upend the current narrative regarding how the intruder gained access. While this lead has not been vetted by major news outlets or confirmed by police, it cannot be ignored. When you stack this claim against the FBI's existing profile, it aligns perfectly with the direction of their active search. We will hold that detail for a moment, because you first need to grasp the gravity of its implications. To see the full picture, you must analyze the house's layout and the precise sequence of events that night. The level of planning suggests the abductor knew exactly what he was doing long before he reached that front porch. Once you realize how much intel this individual had gathered on Nancy Guthrie, the situation becomes much darker. His knowledge of her schedule and security tech suggests that this rumor might actually be the smoking gun. Dissecting an impossible break-in starts with the clock, proving this was no spur-of-the-moment crime. Nancy was last spotted around 9:45 p.m. on January 31st. Her son-in-law, Tomaso Chioni, had just driven her back to the Catalina Foothills after a pleasant family meal at her daughter Annie's. She stepped inside and locked up. When she missed a scheduled online church session the next morning, February 1st, her friends immediately grew concerned. After family found her home silent, they alerted the authorities. By the time the search launched at noon, she was long gone. Detectives focused on that overnight window. At 1:45 a.m., the front door's smart camera was suddenly cut off. By 2:30 a.m., her pacemaker's monitoring app lost its connection, suggesting her medical device was out of range or deactivated. Notice the order of events. Blinding the surveillance was the priority, followed by the biological signal failing. He took out the eyes first. On February 10th, the Bureau salvaged footage from the tampered device, giving us our first glimpse of the man responsible. He wore a mask, full body coverage, gloves, and carried a visible sidearm in a tactical holster. Agents describe a man around 5'9", wearing an average build and carrying a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiking pack. He seems eerily calm. There is no panic in his movements. He walks up to the entrance with a chilling sense of purpose. He manipulates the scene, using foliage to obscure the lens. He is controlling exactly what the investigators are allowed to see. Later reports from ABC News uncovered a startling detail that the feds had initially kept under wraps. A photo of the intruder at Nancy's door without his gear was actually snapped days prior. He had been casing the place. This wasn't his first visit. He scouted the security, left, and returned with a plan and the necessary tools. A local resident named Laura, who uses the same security system, shared her concerns with News Nation's Brian Anton. The iron gate on Nancy's door was top tier. You don't bypass a Diablo lock without making enough noise to wake the dead. Laura was blunt. You don't just kick that gate in. A forced entry from the street is practically impossible. With a barrier like that, nobody is just walking through the front door uninvited. You won't compromise that iron. I even consulted a security professional about it just a few weeks back. Former agent Maureen O'Connell shared that skepticism. Her expert opinion suggests that Nancy was almost certainly hauled out of the house. Moving an 84-year-old woman from a locked home is likely a two-person job, especially if she was incapacitated. Logic points to two possibilities. Imagine a lone actor shifting a weight. A simple shroud or heavy plastic makes that task feasible. It wouldn't be effortless, though. Evidence suggests an intruder had already breached Laura's perimeter before that masked figure ever reached the threshold. Entry wasn't his goal. He stood there, biding his time, waiting for a partner on the other side to throw the bolt. Regarding O'Connell, this operation demanded at least two individuals working in perfect bid, calculated lockstep. Authorities in Pima County remain tight-lipped regarding any signs of a break-in. This quiet isn't accidental. It's a calculated move to protect the case. Yet the framework of the facts, the untouched gate, the duo hypothesis, the timed blackouts leads to a singular grim reality. No random amateur was fumbling with locks in the shadows here. This predator knew exactly what awaited them behind that door. The extortion letters and intimate details prove it. 4 days into Nancy's disappearance, a demand letter reached a Tucson newsroom around 5 o'clock. By nightfall, another local outlet had been targeted. 12 hours later, the story hit the national level at TMZ. Federal agents and local sheriffs quickly acknowledged the threat, questioning if the demands were legitimate. The ransom was set at millions in Bitcoin, dictated by two strict windows of time. If the first bell rang without payment, the terms would shift. Failure to meet the final cutoff promised a much darker outcome. The exact wording of these threats remains locked in police files, shielded from the public eye. That secrecy is a tell. Detectives bury specific phrases to maintain a clean investigation, keeping back facts that only the true kidnapper could possibly possess. These hidden markers act as a sieve, separating the actual criminal from the opportunists and frauds. Thanks to direct confirmation from officials, News Nation has managed to piece together some of the puzzle. That initial letter mentioned Nancy Guthrie's smartwatch and a particular exterior light, pieces of information the police had kept strictly under wraps. Think about that implication. The kidnapper didn't just guess she had a gadget. They specifically identified Nancy's wearable tech. Her watch, a piece of her daily life, not just some generic electronic. They also cited a specific security light, a detail omitted from every news report and police briefing prior to that letter's arrival. The author of that note had intel before the world did. This implies a terrifying reality. The writer had either walked those halls themselves or was briefed by someone who had. At this juncture, the letter ceases to be a mere demand and becomes a footprint of premeditation. It's proof of stalking and deep access. Whoever targeted Nancy Guthrie knew things that couldn't be gleaned from a distance or a casual glance over a property line. 2 more communications surfaced later. TMZ's founder, Harvey Levin, told CNN that the message they received was significantly more disturbing and visceral than the original. The price tag stayed around $6 million, though the requested digital token shifted. According to Levin, the technical complexity of the transaction was remarkably advanced. Former Pima County SWAT leader Bob Krieger, a veteran of Arizona's most intense cases, suggested to Parade that the kidnapper probably wasn't the one typing the letters. His logic was simple. Real captors usually offer proof their victim is alive to ensure the payday actually happens. These letters were missing that vital sign. Yet Krieger noted a crucial detail. Even a message from the fringes of the conspiracy is a massive lead. A person who knows about the watch but lacks the victim's status is an insider the feds desperately need to squeeze. The math is straightforward. Those messages held secrets only an insider would possess. The writer is either the snatcher or their closest confidant. Either way, they've navigated Nancy's private universe. January 11th and 24th. One particular date has been haunting this case like a ghost in the machine. FBI agents kept circling back to it in neighborhood interviews, never explaining why that specific day mattered so much. January 11th was the focus. Reporter Brian Enton was the first to drag that specific date into the light of public scrutiny. During a mid-March broadcast, Enton revealed that federal investigators were scouring neighborhood ring feeds for two very specific windows of time: January 11th and 24th, roughly 3 weeks before Nancy vanished. They wanted any footage from that first evening, which added a startling new layer to the timeline. It predates the actual crime by weeks, and the reason for its importance remains a guarded secret. Something went down, or someone was lurking near her residence 3 weeks prior, and the police are convinced it's the key to the snatching. Sheriff Chris Nanos eventually admitted to the press that January 11th was a critical focal point, though he wouldn't breathe a word as to why. By March 21st, the Guthrie family made a desperate plea for help, urging the Tucson public to look closer at the events surrounding the case. They begged residents to dig through old texts, doorbell videos, and mental logs, highlighting 3 precise moments of interest. They pointed to the end of January, the small hours of February 1st, and most tellingly, the late hours of January 11th. This was the family's first public mention of that date, and they were very specific about it being late in the evening. You don't highlight a specific night 3 weeks prior in a missing persons case unless the evidence screams for it. That level of detail suggests a concrete lead. Something happened in those dark hours that, in the eyes of the law, ties directly to Nancy's fate. Assessing the family's words, Brian Enton flagged that January 11th mention as the most explosive break the case had seen in quite some time. Federal agents had not disclosed the precise timing during their local canvassing, making this timeline a fresh revelation. Digital forensics from an entryway smart camera finally provided that missing link. Specifically, a clear image of the individual was captured by the front porch security lens on January 11th. If we cross-reference that January 11th sighting with reports that the person of interest previously scouted NY's residence, a chilling sequence emerges. The predator evidently identified the surveillance and retreated to strategize, returning only when fully equipped. This suggests a calculated, repetitive pattern of stalking. They were analyzing the estate, identifying blind spots, and monitoring daily habits. This was not a random intrusion, but a validation of prior intelligence. The federal narrative, constructed through silent evidence gathering and pointed interrogations, is methodically driving toward one central, uncomfortable question: who possessed enough intimate knowledge of this estate to conduct reconnaissance and still believe they could successfully infiltrate the interior undetected? The Bureau's focus has shifted heavily toward prior access. While the most sensitive details remain classified, the investigators' visible actions tell a different story. The specific nature of the questions being asked in the surrounding neighborhood reveals a very deliberate and logical investigative strategy. Journalist Brian Enton has maintained a constant presence in Tucson since the early hours of the search, outlasting most other national news correspondents. By early March, he disclosed that agents returned to the Catalina Foothills to grill residents about a neighbor who departed just before NY vanished. He clarified that this inquiry did not officially label the former resident a suspect, yet the vacancy clearly remains a point of intense federal interest. They are specifically scrutinizing one residence where the occupants left right before Nancy went missing. Agents are digging into their history just to be thorough. Furthermore, investigators have been tracking local construction sites, demanding logs of every laborer and contractor present in the weeks leading up to January 31st. This is a surgical, targeted operation, not a blind search. They are hunting for names and timelines, identifying anyone with a plausible excuse to be near the home. By mid-March, reports surfaced that additional footage was pulled from Nancy Guthrie's backyard and driveway sensors. These cameras monitored the pool and the perimeter. Those recordings featured relatives, gardeners, and maintenance staff from the weeks preceding the event. Initially, authorities found nothing outwardly alarming in these clips. However, that process generated a crucial list of individuals with documented, legitimate access to the Guthrie property. It provided a roadmap of who belonged there. These individuals knew the camera angles and the security gates operation. The FBI is not compiling these names as a mere procedural formality. They are hunting for a name that appears on that list today. Or perhaps one that should have been there years ago before a fallout. A new witness account has emerged, involving a former domestic employee. To be clear, this report originated from an independent social media post with significant reach. Neither the FBI nor the Pima County Sheriff's Department has formally verified these claims, nor has any major corporate news organization. We are analyzing this as a developing lead that necessitates professional scrutiny, rather than presenting it as a settled historical fact. We are not identifying or accusing any specific person here. Every theory mentioned is strictly categorized as investigative speculation based on current trends. An online investigator using the handle at JLR Investigates shared a report that reached over 111,000 viewers. While ignored by mainstream press, it has ignited the true crime community. The allegation suggests Nancy Guthrie once employed a foreign medical assistant who lived in her guest suite until being terminated several years ago. A follow-up comment from that same source hinted the individual might have retained a key, potentially explaining the effortless entry into the home. We must maintain total clinical precision here because an 84-year-old woman is still gone, and the search for her remains an active federal priority. This specific lead has not been validated by the FBI or the local Pima County Sheriff's Department as of this moment. No major network like NBC, CNN, or ABC has confirmed this story either. It remains outside the scope of official media reporting. The information stems from a solitary account on X. We cannot confirm if this source has genuine ties to law enforcement or verified insiders. What is certain is that the post is real and has been viewed by over 111,000 people. It has sparked an intense debate among those methodically tracking the technical details of the Guthrie disappearance. More importantly, the claim aligns perfectly with the tactical profile. Federal agents appear to be building through their recent door-to-door inquiries and evidence collection. We aren't pointing fingers or naming suspects. We are highlighting an independent claim that requires a professional deep dive to separate fact from fiction. Here is the logical foundation for why this specific lead demands a serious, high-level investigative response from the authorities. An on-site employee residing in Nancy's cottage would possess an intimate understanding of the property. This far exceeds the knowledge held by any temporary contractor or landscaper. A resident worker knows the house's silence at 2 in the morning. They understand the electrical grid, the plumbing, and the specific mechanics of every lock. They know which lights are automated and which require a hand. They understand the camera's blind spots through daily immersion. Not just a quick glance over the fence. They know Nancy's digital habits, her charging stations, and whether she wears her Apple Watch to bed. They know exactly when her world goes dark. They have the layout memorized so perfectly that they could navigate the entire estate in total darkness years after being dismissed. If a key was ever copied or retained, the mystery of the reinforced gate vanishes. You don't need force when you have a key. The ransom note's mention of the Apple Watch and the specific floodlight details are telling. These aren't observations made from the street. These are high-resolution details. They are the kind of facts learned from breathing the same air and living within the same four walls as the victim. Such intelligence is harvested from proximity. It suggests an intruder who didn't just find the house, but someone who once called it home. The core issue the Bureau must investigate isn't the mere existence of a former live-in employee. The real question is, does this individual's identity already exist within the suspect profile the FBI has been meticulously drafting? If investigators were hunting for everyone in Nancy's orbit and this name never surfaced, that omission becomes a massive red flag. Earlier this month, Harry Trombas, a veteran agent and a vocal authority on this case, spoke with Yahoo News about these shifting dynamics. He suggested that human allegiances are fluid. Someone who once guarded a person's secrets might trade that loyalty for $1.2 million. His theory, the first one to talk, gets the payout. If anyone in Tucson knew this worker or witnessed their firing, they hold the cards. That is the ticket to the reward. It boils down to those intimate details, knowing which entrance she used or how she moved. Possessing a key resolves everything. Let's analyze exactly what having full access to the Guthrie residence would actually clarify for us. When you approach the facts with that specific focus, you realize the case's biggest mysteries all funnel toward one solitary conclusion. Question 1. How did a kidnapper bypass a heavy Diablo gate without a trace with a key? You simply walk in and lock up. No forced entry, no noise, and nothing for neighbors to report or for forensics to document as a sign of intrusion. Question 2. What tipped the suspect off to disable the doorbell camera before the abduction even started? And how did he pinpoint exactly which lens was the critical piece of the home's security network to neutralize? If you had lived on that property for months, you would already know every blind spot and every camera angle by heart. You would understand that blinding the doorbell camera first provides the exact operational window required to pull this off. The rear motion sensors captured absolutely nothing suspicious on the night she vanished, suggesting the intruder knew their way around. The mastermind knew which eyes to shut. Question 3. How did the ransom note detail her Apple Watch and the specific floodlights? Those details weren't public knowledge within 4 days of the crime. Living in that house means you know her tech habits intimately. That level of insight comes from proximity, from spending months living inside those very walls and learning her daily routines. Question 4. How did the suspect locate and kill the utility connections that were disrupted during the kidnapping? Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed to NBC News that they are investigating if a Wi-Fi jammer or a deliberate power cut was used. A mangled utility box is now a key piece of evidence. If you've lived there, you don't need to scout the power lines. You don't gain that kind of knowledge from a single visit. It's the result of time spent there. Question 5. Why did the suspect approach the front door once before, spot the camera, and then decide to retreat into the shadows? Even with prior knowledge, you'd need a dry run to ensure the locks weren't changed or the cameras hadn't been moved recently. That isn't a stranger learning the layout. It's a ghost refreshing their mental map of a place they once called home. One by one, every tactical hurdle points toward an intruder who knew this residence not as a visitor, but as an insider. This wasn't a one-time contractor, but someone who stayed long enough to weaponize their familiarity years after the relationship soured. The mystery of the key and the knowledge of the layout are actually the same piece of the puzzle. The person with the key had the proximity to learn everything: the ransom details, the home's technology, and the bitter end of employment. We have been cautious not to start with a motive, because motives are often just narratives constructed to fit the facts. In a high-stakes case, a false narrative can poison the entire investigation. However, we are now entering the final stage. It is time to put the entire theory on the table, because this is precisely what investigators need to scrutinize. The report on this former live-in staffer isn't just about a disgruntled employee or a missing house key. There is a third, chilling detail in this post that most discussions have completely overlooked. The report explicitly states that Nancy Guthrie fired this person. It wasn't a mutual split, it was a forced termination. Consider the implications of that word when you look at the forensic evidence we have laid out in this video. Imagine someone with intimate access who mastered her routines and tech, only to have that life suddenly taken away by the homeowner. For this individual, the path back into that home wasn't a tactical riddle they had to solve from the outside. It was a set of data they already owned. We won't invent a motive that's for the law, but we will say this. When Harry Trombas mentioned that the FBI has held a consistent motive theory since the beginning, he wasn't speaking lightly. He was highlighting a line of logic that has remained unchanged since the very first day of this investigation. It is entirely possible that the person who snatched Nancy isn't even the person who wrote those ransom notes. Analyst Bob Cryer notes that kidnappers seeking $6 million in Bitcoin usually provide proof of life. These notes didn't. A bitter firing and a years-long grudge don't need cryptocurrency to make sense. They just need a history that became unbearable. Federal agents are openly and systematically scrutinizing every person linked to Nancy Guthrie's inner circle. Contractors, laborers, and former neighbors, every associate is under the microscope. Building access logs, scrutinizing every contact and tracking old ghosts. This strategy only makes sense if you suspect the predator was someone already within the inner circle. Should the rumors regarding a previous worker hold water, then a specific name missing from the files is being guarded by someone in the Tucson area. The Guthrie relatives have been vocal about it. The truth is out there, perhaps hidden in a memory that a neighbor considers completely trivial. This could be the breakthrough. On March 21st, 3 days before this report, the Guthrie family sent a direct message to the people of Tucson. Their 6-paragraph plea was sharp and calculated. They stated their conviction that Southern Arizona holds the key to the mystery because somebody knows the truth. They urged the public to review doorbell cameras, personal journals, and old texts for any strange behavior that seems suspicious in hindsight. They insisted that no detail is insignificant. The family identified 3 critical windows of time, beginning with the night of January 31st, the pre-dawn hours of February 1st, and revealed for the first time the late night of January 11th. Sheriff Chris Nanos spoke with the press, confirming his department's belief that Nancy Guthrie was specifically targeted by her assailant. He admitted to having a working theory on the motive, though he's keeping those cards close to his chest to protect the case. With an ominous tone, he cautioned the public that this predator is capable of striking again without any warning. While the department remains convinced this was no random act, they are pinning their hopes on complex genetic evidence currently undergoing forensic profiling. Investigators are using the same scientific methods that eventually trapped Brian Kohberger for those University of Idaho slayings, following a grueling search for a biological signature that the perpetrator never suspected he had abandoned. Ex-federal operative Lance Lysing noted to the press that such forensics are slow, potentially draining the momentum of the entire case. It is doable. A $1.2 million bounty is still on the table. Contact 1-800-CALL-FBI. Use tips.fbi.gov or reach out to 888-CRIME. If you hold a piece of this puzzle, report it. The mystery of the entry point remains a gaping hole in the narrative. Official records still can't explain how a stranger breached Nancy Guthrie's sanctuary at midnight without tripping a single alarm or breaking a lock. The tactical knowledge of the security grid and the house layout is baffling, but a fresh lead promises to connect every dot if it holds up under scrutiny. A former occupant with intimate house knowledge and a potential grudge, that identity is the key. If you know who it is, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. Ali, we are far from finished with this story. The key to the heart, a lesson in vigilance and love. Behind every bolted door and heavy iron gate lies the one thing technology can never fully protect: our trust. The haunting disappearance of 4-year-old Nancy Guthrie is more than a headline. It is a chilling reminder that the greatest shadows don't always lurk in the streets sometimes. They are the ones we once invited into our homes. We build fortresses of steel to keep the monster out. Yet we often forget that a key in the wrong hands is far more dangerous than a crowbar. This case teaches us a profound, painful truth. True security is not found in high-tech cameras or unbreakable locks. It is found in the unwavering vigilance we owe to our elders. Nancy, with her failing heart and gentle life, deserved a sanctuary that was truly sacred. When professional bonds break or a helping hand departs, we must remember that changing a lock is a small price to pay for a soul's safety. Let this be a wake-up call. Look closer at your neighborhood. Listen to the silence of the night. Our seniors are the heartbeat of our community. They are our history, not targets. Vigilance isn't about living in fear. It's about a community that refuses to let its most vulnerable